Hey everyone, it's time. It's Saturday night and we're going to play the spin the bottle game, find a death style. We did it last week and people seem to really enjoy it, so we're going to give it another shot. It's 10 random names, have no idea who they are, and we're just going to land on the roulette wheel at a random name, and I will do my best to come up with 2 minutes of stories or anecdotes or memories or trivia regarding these people. So, I guess, any warnings, Troy?
No. Open your mind.
Expand. All right, number one, here we go. B. Arthur. There's a good one. B. Arthur, Golden Girls, B. Arthur, Maude. B. Arthur Maude was a great show, actually, a spin-off of All in the Family, along with, the Jeffersons was a spin-off of All in the Family, and thus Good Times was a spin-off of that, and Florida was the maid in Maude, played by Esther Roll. And B. Arthur was a Broadway actress. I saw her do a show called, what was it? It was a tribute to Angela Lansbury at the Chicago Theater. It was of course they did that thing from, was it Mame? With the Bosom Buddies, I think it's from Mame, with Angela Lansbury. Anyway, B. Arthur was a truck driver in the military. That's a true story. B. Arthur, I don't know, she probably won Emmys for the Golden Girls, which was a great show. She was an old joker, and she knew timing. She was like old style. Like she'd tell a joke, and it was really deadpan. And she said, was the joke she told, in Mixed Company, I was there when she said, why is getting oral sex from Estelle Getty like walking a tightrope? And then she paused and she says, whatever you do, don't look down. And most notably, I remember I met her backstage at a show, and I asked her, I had a gossip magazine. She was good friends with Charles Pierce, the drag queen. And I know she went to Charles Pierce's funeral. And I asked her, one of the tabloids said that she contacted him with a psychic. And she said I was crazy. But then she told me I asked about the Golden Girls. And she said, Rue McClanahan, Rue is a sweetheart. But she said, and this is from, can I say it? No, I probably can't. What's the word? Okay, what's a good substitute? Well, she said in Betty White.
C word.
What a C word. It doesn't quite have the impact of actually saying the word. But she just looked, I asked her what it was about, and she had said something about dogs. Something about puppies on the set. Oh, Divine. Oh, God bless her. Divine, Harris Glenn Milstead, Divine. John Waters starred of Pink Flamingos, and my favorite was Female Troubles and Desperate Living. She wasn't in Desperate Living, but in Less Than the Dust. And I saw Divine in concert many times. I wasn't a big fan of Divine, but then when her disco music started coming out, You Think You're a Man was a great one, and I'm So Beautiful was my favorite. And she used to do concerts, and I saw her in concert a couple of times. And one time in Detroit at a club called the Leader Knot, Divine threw me her sweat towel, and my friend who was producing it said Divine wanted to meet me and sent him down to the audience, but by that time I was gone. Then I saw him again at the Limelight in Chicago, and Divine grabbed me up on stage, and I got to dance with her, and she shoved my face in her boobs, in her fake boobs. And Divine died. I was living in Chicago at the time. Divine died at a hotel, the Regency Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard. I remember I was going to try to come to her funeral in Baltimore, but I couldn't get off work at that point. But then they were tearing down the Regency Hotel, and the night I went to visit Phyllis Diller and bought a painting from Phyllis Diller at her house, I was driving home, and Divine's hotel was going to be destroyed, and it was behind barbed wire, and there was a security guard in front of it, and I bribed him $20 to let me in. And I got to scramble around. We went to Divine's room, and I saw some stuff that I wanted. I wanted the front doors, what I wanted. So he let us leave and come back with a tool belt, a tool chest, and we actually removed Divine's door, and I have that. In fact, we just moved it this week from LA storage to Palm Springs storage. And I got the fuse box from that room. I got a couple of knobs from the stove. I wish I would have got the toilet paper holder. That would have been the most perfect thing to get of Divine's. But I'm trying to think if there's any other really good dirt on Divine. I got to lay down where Divine died in that room, and I got to see the last thing Divine saw. I'm So Beautiful. I love that song. Harvey Villachet. So Harvey Villachet was a dwarf actor, a little person, but by medical definition, he had dwarfism. And people who have dwarfism tend to have shorter lifespans than people who were commonly referred to as midgets before. I don't know. Everyone says little people now. How do you differentiate? There is a difference between people that were called midgets and people that were called dwarfs. They're different. And people with dwarfism tend to have more internal problems because their external and their internal don't grow at the same pace. And there's usually a lot of pain involved, organs and things like that. And that's why a lot of the life expectancy, some people end themselves on their own, like Harvey did. David Rappaport was another one who did that up in Laurel Canyon in that dog park. There's been a few over the years, and Harvey, who was a sex maniac, was a real perv. He was a real perv. He demonstrates that in another movie that I liked a lot called The Forbidden Zone with Susan Terrell, who was a maniac. Ricardo Montalban was his co-star. I remember Harvey quit the show because he wanted the salary increase, and nobody really had a lot of nice things to say about Harvey even after he died. I mean, they were kind about it, but it was obvious that Ricardo Montalban didn't have a lot of fond thoughts about him. But when he did it in the backyard of his home that he shared with his girlfriend, I don't think they were married, he tape recorded his ending himself. And the first time he attempted it, it didn't work. And you could hear him tape recording, you could hear him go, shit. And then, which isn't funny, but it was kind of funny. But he recorded it because he wanted to make sure that his girlfriend was never going to be implicated in what he did to himself. So I thought that was kind of an oddly respectable thing to do. So I liked him. Phyllis, Phil Dill. Well, the story about Phyllis I have is that, Troy and I got married the day after Phyllis Diller died, so we marked it by the first day in the world without Phyllis Diller, which wasn't a happy thing, so we both really liked Phyllis Diller. And I was fascinated by her when I was a kid because of that. She just had such a bizarre look to her, and she loved Bob Hope. Bob Hope was an inspiration to her, gave her a break. Same with, I think Johnny Carson did that too. I was just reading, I think Phyllis Diller played a place called the Purple Onion. And was that in New York or LA? But then I was just listening to that Cher book, and she said her uncle owned that club. And he also owned the Haunted House Disco on Hollywood Boulevard. Anyway, so Phyllis Diller sold paintings towards the end. That was her living. And somebody I knew reached out to me and said, do you want to go to Phyllis Diller's house? You can get a few people together and guarantee you're going to buy something. You can do that. So about 6 of us went. I think Steve Goldstein was there, and Jennifer and me, and I don't know, there were about 6 of us. And we got in, and Phyllis was having a dinner party that night. So she had this quick little thing like an hour before her dinner party where she raked in a few grand because it was all cash too. And we got to wander around her house. I went into her bedroom. I went into her office. And basically you pick a painting and then you pay for it cash, and then you go and she'll meet with you and take a picture. And I sat on the sofa with her and I asked her to sign my painting. It was a prayer that she wrote, and I asked her to sign it in her lap, and she thought that was kind of weird, but she did. And I asked her about the pork chop joke. I said, did you write that joke about tying a pork chop around your neck to get the dog to play with you when you were a kid or something like that? And she says, yeah, I did write that. And that's the power of a good joke. And then we were going to take pictures with her in front of this painting in her vestibule. And they were saying, you can take pictures with her. You count on 3, 1, 2, 3, not on 2, not on 3, but on 3. You call her Madam. You don't call her Miss Diller. You don't call her Phyllis. You call her Madam. Can I finish that story? I guess I can't. That's the rules. Look it up on Find a Death, though. Look it up on Find a Death, because the whole story's there. Orson Wells. Wow. Where do you start? You start. It's a funny thing, Orson Welles, because he's considered a genius. Citizen Kane started his career. I never really got it. I thought, well, they made me sit through Citizen Kane in high school, and I thought it was just awful because I want to see something fun, and Citizen Kane, it wasn't a fun movie to a 13 or 14-year-old kid. His voice was really distinctive. There's that great, I think he was drunk doing that wine commercial, and there's him going off on a rant. And he also, I think they did a Little Shop of Horrors when they did the movie. They did an Orson Welles spin-off, like somebody doing the Orson's voice, and there must have been lawsuits because when that was released, the voice is different now. When they do in the beginning of time or whatever it was. But Orson Welles, his ghost supposedly haunted the Maison restaurant on Melrose in LA, which is long gone, but the person who was the head chef there was John Sweeney, who murdered Dominique Dunne. And he died just off Hollywood Boulevard in a house. I was just at that house just a couple of weeks ago. And it's like 2 doors behind the house where Peter Lorre died. I think it's called Stanley Street in Hollywood. And what was I going back to? I know that, his ghost, that's right, the Maison restaurant, Orson Welles' ghost supposedly haunted it. And I don't know if Sweeney worked there at the time. He had to have worked there at the time he murdered Rebecca Schaefer. And now his name is Mora, and he's still a chef in like a senior community. Come on, Orson Welles. RKO Pictures. The RKO Globe is still there. Magnificent Ambersons. I've never seen it. Agnes Moorehead was part of his original Players, the Orson Welles Playhouse. What was it called? The Playhouse. And the Magnificent Ambersons was a movie I've always wanted to see. And Farrah Fawcett. Farrah Fawcett Majors. What was I just reading about her I was reading the Myra Breckenridge cookbook, as you do, and there was an interview with Farrah, and she was saying what a monster Raquel Welch was to deal with. She said that she would just cry. She didn't even want to be an actress after being in that movie, which is kind of sad. But Farrah, and I remember I had such a crush on her before I realized, that she had like real female parts. She was like, she's not a Barbie. But I had the Farrah posters, and I had a Farrah T-shirt, and loved Charlie's Angels, and I remember she quit the show fairly early on. It was a salary thing, I think, and I think that's what it was, a salary. I'm getting her confused a little bit with Suzanne Summers right now, but I remember she did a couple of appearances afterwards. Contractually, she was obligated, so they had her like in alone shoots, like on the phone, sitting on a sofa all by herself, calling, the office or something like that. Clearly not even anywhere near the other two. But she was with Ryan O'Neal for a long time. I think they had a friend. There was legitimately their son, Redmond, who was a nightmare, poor thing. And poor Farrah having to deal with Ryan. And that documentary they did that Rodney Dangerfield's wife, I think it was, did that documentary I'm watching that was just awful. I couldn't, there was one scene where I couldn't watch it anymore. It was so heartbreaking. Married to Lee Majors, thus her name was Farrah Fawcett Majors for a long time. Ask Lee Majors, how was Farrah Fawcett? He goes, Farrah Fawcett who? And he said, Farrah Fawcett Majors. I met Lee Majors once, and he asked me where I was from, and just unprompted, he said, I told him I was from Detroit, and he goes, my parents were killed in a car crash in Detroit. Anyway, Farrah is buried at Westwood Memorial Park, and Ryan O'Neal died. And I don't think she would have liked that personally, but he's buried with her at Westwood, which makes me kind of sad. I loved her. I love Farrah. Janet Leigh. There's some fun stories in here. Okay, Janet Leigh. Mostly Psycho. Everyone knows her from Psycho, mostly, in which she was just a short, not in it for very, very long at all. And she did that. Was that the remake of Psycho that she did? Or no, she did a cameo in, I think, one of the Halloween movies, Halloween H2O, with Jamie Lee Curtis, her daughter. She was married to Tony Curtis. She, I know she's done a ton of movies, and I never really loved Janet Leigh all that much, but I love Psycho. And my friend Kim and I once made a prank phone call to her, which ended up being in her book. She probably got that same call all the time. But we called her, and because we got her phone number from Buddy Hackett's Rolodex, it's kind of a long story, but she answered, Janet Leigh. My friend Kim did all the talking. I was just listening. Is Janet there speaking? Janet Leigh? She goes, who is this? And she said, my friend Kim goes, it's Norman. She goes, Norman? She goes, yeah, Norman Bates. And she said, who is this? He said, this is Kim. And she just hung up. And that is almost verbatim in her book. But I did go to see her at a book signing on Hollywood Boulevard. I forget the name of that bookstore. I think it was with my brother and my sister-in-law too. And I wanted to get her to sign a butcher knife. And this is before it became a thing. Like, you could do that. And I had it in a bag, and I asked one of the people there, will she sign it? She goes, no, she will not sign it. Do not. No, she will not. So I stood in line for the longest time. I had her book, and I just figured, I'm going to ask. There's no harm in asking, I guess. So I said to Janet Leigh, I said, I have a butcher knife in my bag. Her eyes got really wide. And I said, would you autograph it for me? She goes, no, I can't. So my manager said, no, I cannot sign anything like that, because what if somebody were to use this to do something really terrible? So I didn't get my butcher knife signed, but I did get my my book signed by Janet Leigh. I liked her. We just went to Tony Curtis's grave.
Watch your time.
Yeah. Joan, J as in Joan. Joan Crawford. I think my friend Donna and I were just talking about the painting that was of Joan Crawford and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and how it was conned out of the people who owned it. But Joan Crawford, Lucille Lesueur, silent movies, dancer at the Ambassador Hotel. There's lots of stories about how she got to the top, but they would say that Joan Crawford was the movie star, Bette Davis was the actress. She had a thing for thank you notes. She wrote thank you notes like crazy about every single thing. She wrote notes to everybody, very polite. What was it? I liked the women. I think Grand Hotel was another good one that I enjoyed her in. And I'm friends with Casey Lalonde, who is Joan's grandson, son of Cindy, one of the twins, who Christina sort of ignored. Through talking to Casey about Joan and the whole, you got to talk about Mommy Dearest, of course. He said that Christopher and Christina both wrote Mommy Dearest, but Christopher wouldn't put his name on it. And so Christina, put her name on it, the whole thing. And thus, when the will was written, Joan knew that they were writing the book Mommy Dearest. Thus, in the will, she said they get nothing for reasons they know why. And that's the reason why, is because Joan knew they were going to write the nasty book about her, which is, I think, fascinating. And I do think it's BS. I do think Christina, I don't think Joan would have ever won Mother of the Year, but I don't think what Christina claims to have happened to that extreme in any way. But anyone that grew up, 50s, 40s, even 60s knows a bit about the way it was back then and how, punishment was administered. But we like Joan. Joan was, and God, Faye Dunaway, my God, she just defines outrageousness. Faye. And I'm not gonna. Keith Moon. Oh, this could be tough. Well, I like Keith Moon. Didn't he kill somebody? Yeah, I think didn't he hit somebody with a car? I think a chauffeur or somebody who worked in the band in The Who. Keith Moon from The Who. I really wasn't a huge fan of The Who all that much. I liked a couple of their songs, but what really got me to know Keith Moon was in the movie Tommy, which I begged my mother to take me to when it came out. And was it 75? No, 74. Because everyone from the production crew on Tommy moved on to Rocky Horror Picture Show. But Keith Moon played Uncle Ernie, the pervy uncle, and that's how I got to know him. And I always thought he was gross, and I still think he's kind of gross. But he sort of defined bad behavior. I don't know if he was bipolar or what, but he was outrageous, and that fueled by drugs didn't help things very much. But he was like the throwing televisions out of hotel rooms guy. He was the one that would just, you turn your back and you just think, what is going to do next? And I know that he died in London, in Mayfair, in Harry Nilsson's apartment, in the bedroom. the very same bedroom that Mama Cass died in of a heart attack, no ham sandwich. The very exact same bedroom as Mama Cass. And Keith Moon, I believe, is at Golders Green Crematorium in North London, which is where I just talked about something about that really recently, because my little friend Sadie's in that cemetery. But there's certainly a cenotaph for him, and I think that's where his ashes are at. I'm trying to think. I know there's more about Keith Moon than I know, but what I do remember. Oh, didn't he drive a car into a swimming pool? I think he did do that at a party. I mean, that was the kind of shit he just like, oh my God, you can just think, how does this person exist? Because they just do outrageous stuff. But I have to look into that death thing. This is interesting. George Michael. You know, it's funny when you see that Wake Me Up Before You Go video and think, how could anyone not have thought he was gay after those little white shorts and those little white shoes jumping up and down. And when I watched that documentary on George Michael not that long ago, it was so whitewashed. There was like no, I don't know, it wasn't very balanced, I don't think, because there was a lot of, I remember the big Boy George feud. Boy George was like really ruthless in the tabloids back when George Michael still hadn't come out yet. And he only came out because he was sort of forced to, because of that whole incident in Beverly Hills, where that was actually a regular stop on the Dearly Departed tour. That was at the foot of Benedict Canyon, one of the victims of the curse of Benedict Canyon. George Michael, pardon me. George Michael was cruising the bathroom at the Will Rogers Memorial Park across from the Beverly Hills Hotel. And I guess that was a problem because they got this really, really handsome police officer to kind of bait him into going into the bathroom. And they made eye contact, and George Michael kind of presented himself to the guy, and the guy walked out, and George Michael walked out, and then he was arrested for indecent exposure. But him dying on Christmas was pretty ironic. That was an odd death and an ugly end, because the guy he was with for the longest time I think he was left out of the documentary too, which is a big deal. It was like his boyfriend for the longest time, and just kind of got sliced out. That's why you should keep your paperwork in order. If you think money should go to somebody, make sure you do it, and make sure it's airtight, like notarized with witnesses. Like this whole Richard Simmons thing that's going on right now is so depressing. Just make sure it's all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. Oh, that's it? Well, I didn't have to fudge too much this time. I think I did pretty good. It was fun. Odd names. Well, just always odd names. Not names I would originally think of. And then, tomorrow morning, I'll come up with another 5 minutes on each of those names. But that was fun. Thank you, Troy, for putting that together. This week has been a busy week for us. We went to Los Angeles and emptied the contents of our storage locker and brought them to another storage locker here in Palm Springs. So all of our museum items are now in reaching distance from us. So who knows what's going to happen, but at least there's been a step. Everything is out of LA and everything is close to us, which is exciting. And it's been about 2 days of recovery from the move, because it was devastating, but it was a good thing. We hired good movers. So thank you for joining us. That was fun. I hope you had fun. I enjoyed it. All right. Thank you, guys. Take care. Until next time.
You heard